right now on the phone, we have a very special guest, Eliot Shorr Parks.
Welcome back, baby.
Eliot, welcome back to 4th and JAWN. We appreciate you calling in, buddy.
Yeah, no problem. I wish I got intros like that at the bar when I went in or something. That was nice.
Well, I'll tell you what. Next time we'll go out with you, and we'll absolutely everywhere bar that we walk into, we're gonna scream, "Eliot Shorr Parks is here!"
We'll be your entourage.
Give it up. But hey, we'll make sure it's not too loud so nobody gets kicked out of anything for you. Okay, there.
Yeah. Exactly.
The big intro to this show. I know you weren't listening prior. The big intro to this show was the fact that the Eagles went 7-9. And a lot of the people, the Eagles fans, a lot of the pundits agreed that, okay, yeah, that makes sense. 7-9, 8-8, maybe 9-7. It's easier to say the expectation. It's harder to digest it once the season is indeed over. Now that the season is over, how do you feel about that record? Do you look at the Eagles as they're building towards something, the future is bright, or do you find more holes more needs than expected?
Well, I think it depends how you look at it. I mean, I thought this season was all about Carson Wentz and developing him. So if you think about the season in just that regard, I think you have to feel good about how it played out because from week 1 till now, I think there's never been any doubt Carson Wentz is the franchise quarterback. And the fact that he ended the season on a high note, winning those last 2 games, and I think playing his best football of the year. I think in that way you have to consider the season a success, and you almost have to say they're building towards something because of Wentz. I mean, had they gone 7-9 with a quarterback that wasn't a rookie, then I think you could really look and say, I mean, the defense was a disappointment. Fletcher Cox was a disappointment. None of the receivers took a step forward. None of the running backs did. The offensive line, Jason Peters turned in a better season than expected, and clearly Lane's a good player, but him being suspended 10 games obviously was a wrench in his season. So there wasn't a lot of development, really any other position on the team. But the thing is, it happened at quarterback, and that's the most important position in all sports. So going into next season, I think the Eagles have reason to be optimistic, and I think it's solely because of the way Carson Wentz played this season.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a league of the have and have-nots. The haves have a quarterback. As long as you have a quarterback, you have a chance. The have-nots are the guys right now in like San Francisco. You can argue maybe Jacksonville. You can definitely argue the Texans. The have-nots who, even though some of those teams are in the playoffs, chances are they're not going anywhere just because of that quarterback position.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you talk about the team's future. You talk about general manager Howie Roseman. One of the reasons he probably still has a job and isn't on the hot seat as much is because of the quarterback. And you hit the nail on the head. You look around at the other teams around the league. Yeah, the Texans are in the playoffs, but I don't think anybody takes them seriously because they don't have a quarterback. Other teams are rebuilding around the league. The 49ers don't have one. The Jaguars missed on Blake Bortles. So obviously he's played longer. We'll see if Carson Wentz can continue to improve. But really, Wentz is by far the biggest asset this team has right now. And, really, like I said, the only reason to feel optimistic about where this is going.
Now, Doug Peterson, after the season was over, his post-game press conference, he said that he feels the Eagles are, quote, unquote, extremely close. He kept repeating that, extremely close. We're close. Would you agree with that sentiment, or do you think they've got a lot more work to do?
I think they have a lot more work to do. I mean, he cited the fact that I think 6 of their games this year were within 7 points or something like that. And, Marcus Hayes from the Philadelphia Daily News brought up an excellent point that the Niners, only 5 of their losses. So, I mean, I don't think anybody would say the Niners are very close. And the Eagles only lost 1 more game by that margin. The Eagles have the quarterback, which we've talked about at length, but they have a lot of holes they need to fill. They have to find 2 new cornerbacks and at least 1 new starting quarterback. I like Jalen Mills. I know I'm in the minority with that, but I think they need at least 2 new cornerbacks. They need at least 2 receivers. They probably need a defensive end. They're going to need help on the offensive line, depending what they do with Jason Kelsey and Jason Peters. So, these are a lot of holes to fill. And Doug, I guess, has confidence in Howie, or at least publicly has to say that he does. But if you don't have confidence in Howie to fill those holes, I don't see how you can say this team is very close, especially when the Cowboys are in their division. They're probably the best team in the NFC this year, and they have an extremely bright future with Dak and Ezekiel Elliott. The NFC is a lot more competitive than the AFC. There's a lot more roadblocks for the Eagles. And I don't think they're very close, and I don't think they're a playoff team next year.
Now, Eliot, this is Gail. Moving forward to the draft, the sexy pick, Dalvin Cook, Mike Williams, Corey Davis. Getting cornerbacks. You talked about getting cornerbacks. Now, would you hit the free agency, or would you think about drafting a cornerback in the first round? I know everybody's on the Dalvin Cook train right now, but yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, look, not to give the cliche answer, but I do think this is a situation where they need to take the best available player when they do draft. When you look at outside of Carson Wentz, the past few years they have not gotten immediate impacts from their first-round picks. And because of the way their cap situation is currently constructed, they have about $3.5 million in cap space. That will increase when they start to release players. But because they don't have a ton of cap space, they really need to make sure they get difference makers in the first round. Now, if, Mike Williams and Dalvin Cook are on the board at 15 or 14, wherever the Eagles end up picking, I think that's a tough decision. I know everybody wants a receiver, and Mike Williams is certainly a special player, but Dalvin Cook could do so much for this offense. I mean, the way Doug Peterson wants to run it is with a running back that can be on the field all three downs. You look at that loss to Baltimore on the 2-point conversion. They didn't have Ryan Matthews on the field because they don't trust him in passing situations. So the Ravens knew they were going to pass. If they have a guy like Dalvin Cook on the field, I think it throws defenses off a little more, and they can do a lot with it. So I think that would be tough. But if there's a top cornerback on the board there, I think you'd have to look that way too. So the good news is the way the draft seems, obviously we're far out.
Right.
The way it seems like it, there could be at least one cornerback, and I do think they should be able to get a good player there if Howie can find.
Hello, E-Money. How are you?
E-Money.
Is that how you talk to him now? No. You guys are that close that you can
Listen, you know what? Listen, I have a question for you.
EROCK, I'm on Twitch you. You keep it real on Twitter.
Sorry.
I do. He does.
The realist. So listen, if you got to make all the decisions, who would you say from this year's team you would cut, let go of, and what position would you pick up first next year?
Mm-hmm. Well, the easy one would be Eliot McKelvin. I mean, he saves, I think, $3 million against the cap if they get rid of him. So you get rid of Eliot McKelvin. He shouldn't be on the roster next year just off of his play, but the added money is a benefit. I think there's a strong case to be made for Connor Barwin. He wasn't as effective this year in a 4-3 as he was in the 3-4, and he saves you $7 million. But if he was willing to redo his deal, that'd be something I would consider. As far as the position I would pick up in free agency, I think cornerback. I haven't had a chance to look at all the cornerbacks yet, but they need two of them. And so I think you have to get one in the draft, and you got to get one in free agency that you trust to play right away in week one. Because really right now you only have Jalen Mills on the roster. Nolan Carroll's a free agent, and Eliot McKelvin I don't think will be back. So I think cornerback is a position I would attack most aggressively as free agent.
Piggybacking off of that free agency question, a lot of the discussion for the last 2 weeks here on this show has been about one former Eagle, and that's DeSean Jackson. Now, DeSean's going to be a free agent. There's been interest, at least text messages shared, conversations shared, but nothing official, as Brandon Graham stated on Breakfast on Broad. Would you or would you not bring back DeSean Jackson, and why?
So I would not. I think DeSean is still a talented player, and I think even though his game's predicated on speed, the fact that he's still a name people worry about means a lot. I think down the field, teams still have to worry about him, but like I mentioned before, the Eagles are not ready to compete, and they're probably 2 years out from doing that. DeSean's 30 now. He'll be 31 midway through next season, and he realistically could be 33 years old by the time the Eagles are serious contenders in the NFC. And if I'm the Eagles, I want players that I know are going to be here for the long haul when this team's ready to compete. I mean, you can say whatever you want about Jordan Matthews, but at least he probably has at least 5 or 6 good years left, barring injury. So if I'm the Eagles, I would go after younger players in free agency. And there's also the financial situation. DeSean, I don't know what he's going to cost, but the Eagles don't have a ton of space. And even if they create that space, I don't think using a good portion of your salary cap on a 30-year-old receiver whose game is built on speed is the best use of their resources.
Well, I can certainly respect that answer. Everybody here is pro DeSean, but listen to you argue the points against DeSean. Listen, that all makes sense. Now, last thing before we let you scoot out of here, and again, we appreciate you calling in on the final episode of 4th and John for the season. I would not be doing my job as a host of a podcast if I didn't ask. And I will certainly respect an opt out for a no comment. But could you elaborate or at least speak on what, because us fans are in the dark here, what exactly happened in the press box with Jeff McLane?
Well, I feel like the story might have been told to death at this point. But so the only thing I will say is, me and Jeff McLane don't always agree on opinions with sports. I think, Eagles fans, as you all know from following everybody on Twitter, we all have different opinions on different things. But in this instance, Jeff McLane did absolutely nothing wrong. I thought the way the Eagles handled it, frankly, was inappropriate, and I thought they took a situation that was nothing and turned it into a big deal. My colleague Mark Eckel, who's covered the Eagles for 32 years, said that he's never seen anything like that in the press box. And he wasn't talking about the way Jeff McLane was acting. He was talking about the way the Eagles handled that situation. So anybody who, thinks that maybe this is McLane just making a big story or something, no, that's really not. I think the Eagles probably regret the way they handled the decision to handle it. And, I think it was made into a big deal when it shouldn't have been.
Well, we appreciate your comments on that, and we appreciate you calling in and your support of 4th and John. We love what you do on Twitter. We love what you do for NJ.com. Again, thank you so much for calling in and giving us a brief moment of your time. Thanks, Eliot.
Keep it real on Twitter, ESP.
Keep it real. Keep it real, baby.